This video shows you how to use the Clinical Records module in iClarity. The iClarity Clinical Records module consists of 4 record types: pre-screening, clinical records, contact lenses and other or non-site test records. The patient information in the Clinical Records module is more sensitive than that stored in other parts of the system. It is strongly recommended that you use the Maintenance module and the Form Permissions tab to create a user group for registered staff. You can then assign your professional staff to that group and ensure that only they have access to the full clinical records forms. The clinical record is accessed by pressing on the clinical button on the main patient form. Depending on your system configuration, you may be asked to put your password in here. Then select Clinical Records from the menu. The first time you access the form for each patient, you will be presented with a blank clinical record. Once you have created a patient's clinical record, then the most recent is displayed. If you have a previous record displayed for a patient, you first need to click on the New Clinical Records button. It is designed to be both completed and then read from the top left down to the bottom right, following the natural flow of information and the narrative arc of a typical examination. Once you start entering data into the clinical records fields, the data will be automatically saved every 5 minutes. So even if your system has an outage, for example a power cut, then the most you will lose is any data entered in the previous 5 minutes. Of course, if the power cut occurs just after the automatic save has occurred, then you won't lose any data at all. Several fields in the clinical record can be populated with templates that in turn can either be specific to the current user or generic and used by all users in the practice. The 2 fields in the clinical record that can contain templates are the main reasons for visit and initial patient notes, or the right and left notes fields. You can select the template you want to use in each of these fields by clicking on the down arrow that is visible. This will allow you to select from either your own templates, which are specific to the logged in user, or the generic templates accessible to everyone. You can set default templates for these fields so that there is no need to click on the arrow. These will automatically appear when you open a record. These are set up in the Users tab in Maintenance. Templates can simply contain text to identify data items that you need to enter, or can contain tags identified with pairs of chevrons. Right-clicking on a tag allows you access to a list of predefined answers from which you can select one or more and then replace the selected tag with the answer. When you have used tags, you can still free type additional information or edit the existing answer. You can also enter additional answers on the fly by typing in the new answer you want, then clicking Add this answer. This will both insert the selected answer into the record and add it to your list of personal answers for the selected tag to use in the future. Adding answers on the fly is a feature that can be disabled if required. If you have selected answers from the Tag Answer form and clicked OK, then the dialog box disappears. If you want to bring it back, for example because you want to add further answers, you can press Ctrl, Alt and T on your keyboard. This will bring up lists of all possible tags. Select the tag that you would like to see the list of answers for. And then select the answers. Taking you through the natural flow of the record, there is an occupations drop-down list. Any selection made in this box will update the occupation field on the Further Details tab of the main patient record. Once the record is confirmed, the occupation that was selected in this record will be fixed to this record, so that subsequent changes to the occupation fields in future will not edit the information that was recorded on this clinical record. When you create a new clinical record, the occupation selected on the Further Details tab will automatically come through in this box. It is open for editing if needed. Next is the previous prescription details. These are displayed here in descending order of date. These are the prescriptions that can usually be viewed from the summary prescription form on the main patient record. When starting to use the Clinical Records module, you may find it useful to have support staff key in the most recent prescription in the summary form prior to the examination. These details can then be copied to the objective and subjective prescriptions. The main reasons for visit and initial patient notes section is a text field that can be completed in one of 4 ways. If your practice is using the pre-screen form, then the details can and should be copied from the most recent pre-screen using the pre-screen button. The information collected at pre-screen is now pulled through to the main reason for visit and initial patient notes. This is editable. You may have it set up so that once the information has been pulled through, below the dashed line, there is still some information for the optometrist to record. Secondly, you can simply free type the information into the box. You can set a default template for this field, or you can select a different template from the list of personal and generic templates by clicking on the arrow. Whichever method you choose, you can edit the contents at any stage. The unaided and presenting VAs can be recorded here. There is space to make a note of which spectacles the patient was wearing when their presenting VAs were tested. The VAs entered here also appear in the non-editable greyed out boxes against the objective, subjective and final prescription. General health, ocular history, family history and medication. These 4 boxes all come pre-populated with tags, so you can predefine possible answers. In the list of possible answers for family history, we recommend predefining family members, such as mum, aunt, brother, etc., as well as the possible conditions such as diabetes and glaucoma. This way, you can select the family member that may have had the condition. When you select the medication tag, the possible tag answers dialog is slightly different. You can search for answers based on condition. This will then display just the medications that are appropriate for the selected condition. The contents of each of these 4 boxes is always copied forward to the next clinical record, and a new tag is added to the existing content. You can then add to these conditions or delete any that no longer apply. All clinical record data is by default output to a PDF file. This means that you can always read a patient's clinical data, even if iClarity is no longer installed. It also means that you can send the entire clinical record to a third party if required, for example the GOC or an ophthalmologist. However, we cannot guarantee the security of these audit files, as they are stored in Windows folders, and so their security is a function of your network setup and infrastructure. If there is information in these boxes that is of particularly sensitive nature, this can be excluded from the audit files by clicking on the Mark as Confidential tick box. You can enter pachymetry details here, or click the Previous Pachymetry button. This will display previous values. Pressures can be entered in one of 3 ways. From the pre-screen form, which will automatically pull through, by importing from a connected, compatible instrument, or by typing the values in the test room. There is no need to enter the date. iClarity will default to the current date and time, although this can be edited if you wish. Select the instrument from the drop-down list. You can then enter the 3 values for each eye, and the average will be worked out, or you can just put the average in. Then click on the Add button. The pressures records are not linked to a specific clinical episode, so you can enter pressures on different days without having to create an entire new clinical record. Next is the spec history. Any spectacles that were dispensed using iClarity will automatically be added to this list once the spectacles have been collected by the patient. Any specs that have not been dispensed through iClarity or may have been purchased elsewhere can be added in the pre-screen form. The right and left notes is where you enter details of the examination itself. Although you can free type in the relevant boxes, it is highly recommended that you create templates that contain prompts and tags for the procedure that you want to follow. There are 6 buttons that are displayed when the notes part of the clinical record form is not selected, i.e. you have not yet clicked into one of the 3 boxes. Copy Previous allows you to copy the contents of the 3 boxes from the previous clinical record. You You can then edit and update the contents. You must do this before you start entering any new details, as this action will overwrite the contents of all 3 boxes. If you do not use the Copy Previous button to fill in both the right and left notes, once you've filled in the notes on the right side, you can use this yellow arrow to copy them across to the left side. Take care, because this action will overwrite the contents of the left notes field, so you should do this before you start amending the contents. These buttons allow you to change the size of the text. The size you choose will be retained when you save the record. You can specify a default text size for each user by selecting the User tab in Maintenance and entering the default font size in the Font Size column. The arrow button allows you to select the appropriate template for this examination, or a different one from the default if the default is defined for the current user. You should choose your template before you start entering any data. Selecting a new template will override any data that you may have already entered. Once you have completed the examination notes, you can move on to the prescription section. You can enter information into the objective part of the examination. To view the objective and subjective prescriptions, click on the blue up arrow. This will make this notes section smaller, but will display the objective and subjective prescriptions. Enter information into the objective part of the examination in 4 ways. By typing the values in directly, by importing data from a compatible connected instrument such as an autorefractor, or by copying the relevant values from a previous prescription displayed in the top left of the form. Select the prescription you wish to copy by double-clicking the grey box to the left of the prescription. You can then choose whether to copy the prescription to objective or subjective, and if you would like to transpose the prescription. If you already have data entered, you will see the following warning message. You can also do this using the specs history. There is room for recording BVD and PDs against the objective. However, the PD field is a memo field only and is not copied to either the summary prescription form or the dispensing form. This is by design. As in the pre-screen form, if the spherical powers have different signs, the boxes will turn pink. The subjective prescription can also be populated in the same 4 ways that the objective prescription can be, with the additional method that it can also be copied from the objective prescription on the record. There are several different additional fields associated with the subjective. These are distance and near prism, and add the VA and the near VA and pinhole. To enter prisms, click in the relevant field and you will be presented with this box. Enter the appropriate values and select the direction of the prism from the drop-down lists. Once you have entered the details of the distance prism, this can be copied to the near prism field by clicking the Copy Prism button. This can then be edited if required. The final prescription can be populated in 3 ways. By typing the values in directly, by importing from a compatible and connected phoropter, or by copying from the subjective prescription by clicking on the down arrow button that is to the left of the subjective prescription. The final prescription is the prescription that is displayed at the top left of the form in future records. It is also used to populate the summary prescription form that is accessed from the main patient form and is therefore the prescription that is used as the basis for dispensing. The Early Retest Code button. If you have a patient that has presented for an NHS site test before they're clinically due, you can select the reason that you have seen the patient earlier than normal by clicking on the Early Retest Code button. This will display a list of codes. Select the relevant code and click OK. The code will then be shown in this box. If you are going to recall the patient for an examination earlier than recommended by the NHS, then you can tick the box Use Next Test. At the next examination, iClarity will prompt you to apply an early retest code. If needed, you can remove the early retest code by clicking on the Remove button. The Clinical Notes exam outcome box is intended as a narrative summary of the examination. For example, new prescription has been issued, recommended specs updated, or a referral to a GP. You can predefine possible answers using the Exam Outcome tab in the Maintenance module. You can also free type your summary. The information in this field is available as a merge field, so it can be used to create a standard document. For example, a patient prescription that includes the summary outcome. The recommendation drop-down allows you to record what you believe the outcome of the examination should be. For example, if you have recommended the patient be dispensed. This information is useful for reviewing clinic outcomes. The option No RX is excluded from the total of tests that might be considered dispensable. The Referred checkbox allows you to record whether you need to refer a patient or not, and whether a response has been received. You can find the list of patients who have been referred in a report called Referral Responses from the main report menu. If you tick the referred flag, this also creates an automatic action assigned to you in the Patient Activity tab. So if you do not have time to do the referral there and then, you will see that you have an action to do a referral outstanding whenever you log into iClarity. The type of examination can be selected from this drop-down list. Corporate is for any examination undertaken for a third party, such as a local business you have an agreement with. NHS will automatically be selected if a patient has an NHS reason defined on their main form. If they do not, then private will automatically be selected. NHS, NHS domiciliary and private will all cause the appropriate fee to be automatically added to the patient's sale. Retest will not assign a fee to the patient's sale. It will also not modify the recall date. Supplementary exams are for non-site test exams. The prescription will not be used in any dispensing or used as a merge field in patient documents. Supplementary valid prescription is also for a non-site test examination, but one where the patient was refracted and so the prescription is valid and can be used for a subsequent dispensing. Recall scheme can be selected from this drop-down list. If the patient is already assigned to a recall scheme from a previous examination, this will be the default scheme. You should make sure that this is still appropriate and alter if necessary. The next due date defaults to the date of the current exam plus the number of days specified in the Maintenance Recall Scheme tab for the selected recall scheme. This then becomes the date that is displayed on the main patient form, highlighted in pink the next time the appointment is overdue. Write this date with a different date of your choosing. However, this will not alter the recall date in the Communications tab for the patient, so you would need to go into the Communications tab to manually alter the communication date. The Dispensing Notes box is where you can record any dispensing or lifestyle factors that you have discussed with the patient. The contents of this field will appear on the summary prescription form and be copied through to any new dispensers. The default tag Dispensing Notes will enable you to predefine possible answers in the maintenance module. From within clinical records, you can create documents. This button allows you to select a predefined template and create a communication completed with the details from the patient record, such as a patient prescription. Store document allows you to save documents with the patient record that has not been created by iClarity, for example a letter from a GP. Scan and Store button will allow you to directly scan a document by placing the document on the scanner and then clicking on the button. This will start the scanning process automatically. Then you just need to choose the appropriate patient folder to store it in. Retrieve Documents allows you to retrieve and display any patient documents. The Load Drawings button allows you to view any drawings that have previously been created. You can also modify them, or you can create a new one. The new clinical record button was covered in the first video. When opening a patient record, the most up-to-date eye exam will be displayed. You need to click the new clinical record button to start a new eye examination record. The Summary button displays all clinical record note fields in the form of a report that you can scroll through. You can view this at the same time as you are viewing and editing the current clinical record. Your clinical records contain the most important and irreplaceable information that you hold on your computer system. As well as using them day to day for normal clinical and dispensing purposes, you need to be able to have access to them outside of iClarity for several other reasons. Providing patients with a copy of their records, providing copies to ophthalmologists or other optometrists, providing lawyers or the GOC copies, or in the event that iClarity is not working or no longer being maintained or rented. To cover these eventualities, iClarity automatically creates a human-readable PDF audit file for each patient's clinical record whenever that is created or updated. More precisely, and to avoid the number of these audit files becoming unmanageably large, it creates one audit file per patient per day. This is updated every time the patient record is updated on the same day. If the patient record is updated at a later date, then a new audit file is created. These files are stored in the Audits subfolder of each patient's Windows folder. Each file is cumulative, that is, it contains all the clinical data, including data from previous visits, that was stored up to the point that the file was created. The point of these files is that they are human readable, so you should ensure that your computer network is sufficiently secure and that you have appropriate protocols in place to prevent these files being accessed by unauthorised persons. Although the audit file is created or updated automatically whenever you exit an updated clinical record, you can use the Audit Clinical Record button to force an update to occur. Once you have completed a clinical record, there may still be unused tags that you have not used because they were not necessary on this occasion. This button removes unused tags so that the final record is clearer. This will not remove any tags that are listed as required for compliance reasons. If you wish to reinstate a tag, then you can press Ctrl, Alt and T on your keyboard to display the full list of tags. The Contact Lens button allows you to switch between the contact lens and the clinical record forms. These can be open at the same time. The other button allows you to switch between other clinical records and the current clinical record form. These can also be open at the same time. The Export Objective button allows you to export the objective prescription to a suitably configured instrument, for example a phoropter. Instrument data allows you to receive data from a suitably configured instrument, for example lens meters, autorefractors and phoropters, which can populate the subjective. Supervisor sign-off allows a user to sign off the clinical record that has been completed by someone else, for example a student or pre-reg. When you press this button, you will be asked for the password of the person signing off the record. The button will then be greyed out and will show the initials of the user who signed off the record. Imaging allows you to access the iClarity imaging menu. This allows you to take, store and review imaging data from a variety of different systems, including fundus cameras, slit lamps and OCTs. Save Record allows you to save the current record, then continue working on it. Exit allows you to quit this clinical record. When you first exit a new clinical record, you are presented with the Confirm Clinical Record screen. You do not have to complete this when you first exit a record. You may wish to close without confirming details. You may wish to return to it if you are deciding on an appropriate recall interval or whether or not to charge additional fees or refer the patient. This form will continue to be displayed whenever you access the clinical record until you click on either of the two Confirm buttons. Confirming this part of the record confirms the site test recall, the next due date, records any early retest codes, and whether or not the patient has been referred. It also records any selected fees. Because the information you need to confirm is so important, there is a column on the Clinic Outcomes Report. This is the Finalised column. This gets set to Y once each clinical record has been confirmed. We strongly recommend reviewing this report after each clinic to ensure that all records have been fully completed. This way you can check that each record from the day's clinic has been updated. Before confirming the record, please make sure that the correct fee for the test carried out is in the Selected Fees box. If it is not, you can double-click to remove any incorrect selected fees, and you can double-click in the top box of anything that you would like to make a selected fee. You can also filter this list. Confirm Details and Close will confirm the details and exit the clinical record. Confirm Details and Load Claims will confirm the details, exit the clinical record, and load the patient's GOS1 claim. This is the recommended choice if you are using eGOS.